господин Абрамович может принять участие в одном из таких проектов. Пусть раскошелится немножко, ничего страшного, у него будет, у него много там денег.
In a world where power is sometimes passed down from generation to generation by birthright, there was a daredevil who managed to build his own empire almost out of thin air, having nothing but bold ambition and unbreakable courage. This is the story of how young Roman Abramovich, who grew up far from the center of events in the cold backwoods of a vast country, managed to turn into one of the most influential and most incomprehensible oligarchs on the planet. His path is something much bigger than a simple story of a man who got rich. It is a story of survival in an era when every day could bring new upheavals, and of the ability to understand a game that defies the logic of most people. Having personally experienced the collapse of the Soviet Union and managing to take control of the most profitable sectors of the Russian economy, Abramovich not only built a financial empire, but also redefined what it means to be a billionaire. Get ready to dive into a fascinating story about a man whose path leads from an abandoned corner of the map to a throne standing on Russian oil, metals, and sporting triumphs. Roman Abramovich was born in Soviet times, when harsh reality and political pressure often killed dreams at the root. In the cold heart of the country, where the lack of opportunities could seem insurmountable, this boy from a tiny, poor settlement managed to break through to the top and become a figure both mysterious and grand. He did not grow up in a family where silverware waited on the table, nor did he have powerful patrons back then, but he did have a sharp mind, a fierce drive to win, and a stubborn desire to survive in the toughest conditions. This is exactly what brought him into the orbit of major cash flows. Before long, Abramovich's name stood alongside the biggest entrepreneurs who held sway in the oil and aluminum industries. In the turbulent late 1990s, he joined the ranks of billionaires. Support from the powerful and close contacts with the political leadership opened doors to where the largest state assets were being handled. But Roman did not stop at business. He gained a significant role in the cultural and social life of his country as well. Of course, none of this happened suddenly or by the wave of a magic wand. To understand how colossal a journey he made, we need to go back to his early years, which for a long time were almost unknown to the wider public. Roman Abramovich was born into a poor family on October 24, 1966. He came into the world in Saratov, a city on the vast banks of the Volga. From his earliest days, life treated him brutally. Before he even turned 1, his mother Irina died due to complications after a failed medical procedure. Sometime later, tragedy struck again when his father Arkady died on a construction site. Thus, little Roman was left an orphan almost in infancy. After a while, relatives on his father's side took the boy in. He moved to Ukhta, a harsh northern town in the Komi Republic, where the climate frightens with bitter cold and resources in those years were very modest. There, Roman was raised by various relatives and had to live in an atmosphere of constant austerity. However, these tough conditions hardened his character and sharpened his entrepreneurial streak. In those years, the Soviet system was already beginning to slowly crack, and young Abramovich was about to learn what it meant to swim against the current. In the early 1980s, he reached adulthood and enrolled at the Moscow State Auto Transport Institute. But his passion for earning his own money outweighed academic pursuits, and he left his studies, following the call of his inner ambition. The Soviet Union at that time was entering its sunset phase. The ideals of communism were collapsing, and that opened up boundless opportunities for the enterprising, even though those opportunities were riddled with dangerous traps. In 1988, Roman went off to fulfill his military duty in the ranks of the Soviet Army. Although he had no intention of building a military career, his time in the army became a platform for strengthening his self-discipline and survival skills. It was a strict and often humiliating environment, but Abramovich looked at it as training that would later be useful in business. By the time the Soviet Union fully collapsed in the early 1990s, only the most determined people could profit from the raging chaos. Abramovich did not hesitate. After moving to Moscow, he saw colossal opportunities where many saw only ruin. The barriers that had previously stifled entrepreneurship suddenly loosened, and legal changes encouraged the creation of private companies. In his first steps, he invested modest savings and took tiny loans to start selling consumer goods. Humble street trade and plastic ducks on Moscow sidewalks was just the first stepping stone on his road to astonishing wealth. Like many enterprising people of his time, Abramovich understood that the economic transformation in the newborn post-Soviet reality held enormous potential, provided you were ready to take risks. The free market turned out to be a real Klondike for those who dared to act in it. They say that he began honing his first serious commercial skills during his army service, trading fuel of questionable origin, and at the same time learning the basics of the shadow economy. Later, he tried again to study at a Moscow institute, but quickly dropped out, focusing entirely on business. From the late 1980s to the mid-1990s, almost everything in Russia was turned upside down, and the privatization of state resources, launched by the government, opened mind-blowing opportunities. It is in such turning points that those who can spot the gaps in the market take off. It's no surprise that at the very beginning, Abramovich did something as simple as selling plastic toys, dolls, and ducks. It's almost funny that the man who would later become an oil tycoon once scraped together coins by selling cheap toys. But behind those simple items was an important understanding of reality. The market had radically changed the rules, and anyone who dared to accept those rules could win. This early business, modest as it was, highlighted Roman's growing shrewdness. He realized how important it is to offer exactly what the buyer is lining up for. He quickly moved on to perfumes and other goods that were in demand among the new Moscow fashion crowd. Connections and acquaintances multiplied, and with them, new opportunities. Of course, conditions were far from ideal. To make sure freight reached its destination, bribes were sometimes needed, and criminal gangs never missed a chance to offer their services. Abramovich later admitted openly that he sometimes had to resort to gray schemes, because back then there was almost no other way to survive in that market. The period after the official collapse of the Soviet Union was a phenomenon in itself. A giant country that had previously tightly controlled business and the economy suddenly turned into a field for ambitious plans, with enormous risks attached. The state began handing out assets, and those who sensed the profit in time quickly snapped up the juiciest pieces at prices far below their real value. It was oil, that black elixir of Russia, that opened the doors to dizzying wealth for Abramovich. He quickly realized that without the right contacts and partners, it was impossible to carry out large-scale deals. This is how his meeting with influential Boris Berezovsky happened, a man who already had weight in both politics and business circles. Berezovsky, who had connections at the very top, became a kind of patron to Abramovich, who needed access to high-level offices. Their joint purchase of shares in the oil company Sibneft went down in history as one of the most remarkable operations of the Russian privatization era, when strategic assets were often sold into private hands at bargain prices. In 1995, using Boris Berezovsky's connections and his own business skills, Abramovich became a co-owner of Sibneft for a sum that was astonishingly far from its real market value. Later, however, the value of this oil company soared to levels measured in immense capital. Day-to-day management and strategic decisions lay mainly on Roman's shoulders, while Berezovsky provided a tangle of political and media protection. Sibneft grew so fast that Abramovich's fortune multiplied many times and propelled him into the league of the country's biggest oligarchs. But oil was not the end of the story. Roman saw in time that there were big prospects in metals too, especially amidst the fierce battle for the aluminum market. He invested in metal production, partnered with Oleg Deripaska, and helped create the giant company Rusal, then profitably sold his stake. Soon another crucial event followed. He sold his share in Sibneft to a state-linked gas giant, receiving for it a sum amounting to tens of billions of dollars. These moves cemented his status as a billionaire and firmly placed him on the top levels of the financial pyramid. When it comes to Abramovich's former partnerships, his conflicts with Boris Berezovsky cannot be overlooked. At first, Berezovsky helped the young businessman rise, but times changed. Berezovsky entered into open confrontation with President Vladimir Putin and eventually was forced to leave Russia under Kremlin pressure. Abramovich, meanwhile, unwilling to quarrel with the state, managed to preserve and even expand his influence by maintaining political neutrality. This became the basis for accusations of betrayal from Berezovsky, who claimed he was forced to sell his Sibneft shares for a fraction of what they were worth. The dispute escalated into a high-profile court battle in the United Kingdom. Berezovsky complained of intimidation and insisted that he had not received the money he was owed. Abramovich stood his ground. According to him, there were no violations, and Berezovsky was not a legal co-owner. After many months of hearings in London's High Court, Abramovich emerged victorious. Berezovsky failed to prove his case, which only worsened his financial and emotional situation. Later, he died under strange circumstances, never having obtained what he considered justice. Meanwhile, Abramovich continued to strengthen his position, becoming an ever more prominent figure on the international stage. Having survived the battles in oil and metals, Roman Abramovich did not remain unnoticed by the global public, but his true worldwide fame and recognizability came after his purchase of London football club Chelsea. This happened in the early 2000s, when Chelsea, though it had glorious chapters in its history, was at that moment in trouble. Funding was weak, and major trophies had been absent for a long time. Buying the club for a substantial sum sent shockwaves through the football world. Roman Abramovich poured enormous investments into the team, signing star players from all over Europe and hiring top-class managers. Never before had an owner injected so much money into English football. Very soon, Chelsea began to climb to the top of national and continental competitions. Under the guidance of famous managers, the club won prestigious cups, took Premier League titles, and finally captured the coveted UEFA Champions League trophy. That cup in the hands of the London side became the culmination of Abramovich's football odyssey and clear proof of his desire to win at any cost. This strategy not only transformed Chelsea, but also changed the landscape of European football itself. It became obvious that the arrival of a wealthy investor could radically alter a club's fate and usher in a new era of big money, where the ambitions of owners play an almost decisive role. Chelsea fans praised Abramovich for saving the club, elevating him to the status of a football hero. Against the backdrop of all those financial deals and sports projects, Roman Abramovich's personal life has also attracted plenty of public attention. He has been married several times and has a large family. His first marriage was to Olga Lisova, a flight attendant, with whom he had a daughter named Anna. But the marriage soon fell apart, and as his wealth grew, it became harder and harder to maintain family harmony. Then Roman married Irina, who had formerly worked for Aeroflot. They had 5 children together: Arkady, Sofia, Ilya, Irina, and Ilya. The family lasted more than a decade, but this marriage too ended in divorce. It was said that Irina received a very generous settlement. His next marriage was to Dasha Zhukova, known for her active work in the world of contemporary art. They had a son, Aaron Alexander, and a daughter, Leah. Although they later went their separate ways, both have tried to maintain friendly relations, something Abramovich himself has often emphasized. Though he keeps most personal details private, he has a reputation as a caring father, investing heavily in his children's education and future. As a man of colossal wealth, Abramovich is famous for his real estate around the globe. His luxurious estates in London, including one of the most expensive properties in Kensington, are truly impressive. This house has everything, from a private cinema to an indoor pool and a multi-car garage. Equally impressive are his properties in France, where fairy tale gardens stretch along the Mediterranean coast. In the United States, he bought a lavish townhouse in Manhattan. And of course, he still owns magnificent houses and dachas in picturesque corners of Russia. But what really makes people talk about Abramovich as one of the most sophisticated lovers of luxury is his fleet of yachts, often compared to palaces at sea. The most famous yacht in his collection bears the name Eclipse, a true floating city, nearly 550 feet long, equipped with countless entertainment areas, pools, security systems, and according to rumors, even a mini submarine. Such a large-scale project was valued by experts in astronomical sums. And in true Abramovich fashion, he complements one luxury with another, owning a whole set of private planes. From huge airliners with luxury bedrooms and conference rooms, to fast business jets where comfort goes hand in hand with speed. But any deafening success, backed by lavish spending, inevitably attracts a lot of questions. Lawyers, tax authorities, and political opponents have repeatedly tried to unravel the knot of where all this unimaginable wealth really came from. Many critics fault Abramovich for not being transparent enough about how exactly he managed to buy up so many state assets. The privatization of Sibneft and just how close his relationships were with key government figures are especially frequently mentioned. For a long time, Abramovich was seen as a special figure who maintained good relations with the Kremlin. He was accused of using that closeness to gain competitive advantages, including in deals to buy oil and gas companies. Abramovich himself always tried to distance himself from loud public statements, but suspicions and whispers around these stories have never fully died down. When the conflict between Russia and Ukraine broke out, many Russian businessmen with large fortunes ended up under harsh Western sanctions. The UK, EU countries, and the United States imposed restrictions on the most influential individuals whose assets or ties to the Russian authorities raised concerns. Abramovich, as a billionaire and major shareholder in various companies, found himself at the very epicenter of this process. His assets in the UK were frozen, he was banned from entering the country, and Chelsea, the club he owned, was forced to be sold. In the end, the team passed into other hands, and Abramovich lost the symbolic creation he had proudly developed for many years. Similar measures were taken in European Union countries, where he also still had property and many other commercial interests. To get ahead of the pressure, Abramovich tried to move part of his assets out of harm's way in advance. But the global system for tracking the wealth of the ultra-rich made such maneuvers far more difficult. Information periodically leaked to the press about how, through a network of offshore companies, he nonetheless managed to hide yachts and other property. According to various estimates, Abramovich controlled at least several premium-class vessels, each worth a colossal amount. The documents published in the media mentioned other assets previously unknown to the general public. Multiple investigations are still ongoing, and Abramovich's legal team is far from idle. They are trying to challenge some of the sanctions and keep whatever has not yet been blocked. From an orphan in a remote northern town to a man controlling unimaginable wealth and capable of changing football history with a single signature, Abramovich's journey is anything but ordinary. He built major businesses in oil, gas, and metals, and then brought his passion for success to the sports arena, turning Chelsea Football Club into one of the most powerful teams in Europe. His fortune, according to various estimates, approached $10 billion by 2024. One way or another, his story is not just a chronicle of financial deals, but also a record of victories and setbacks, family troubles, and spectacular triumphs on the football pitch. Will legal and political turmoil destroy his empire, or will he once again find a way out of any storm? There are no definitive answers yet, but one thing is certain. The bright and multifaceted biography of Roman Abramovich will always arouse curiosity and remind us that sometimes all you need to take off is faith in yourself, bold decisions, and a willingness to risk everything for the grandest game of all. Thank you for watching till the very end. If you're fascinated by the world of luxury, the destinies of famous and insanely rich people, and in general by everything that is most expensive and extravagant, then subscribe to the channel for the richest. There's going to be a lot more content like this here.